It could all start with a bunch of warm pixels, where a cathode tube is shooting light onto a progressive scan monitor, or a liquid crystal display is floating digital waves across its screen. The result is the same, and the feeling is timeless. Or you could go even further back, of course, and point to any prehistoric campfire surrounded by hominids. The story would happen there as well, and they would persist as well. They would be retold, and years later their children would tell their children, and their children's children the stories, and they would inevitably feel it, the shared nostalgia. A brief pocket of one's personal journey through time, encapsulated in a moment, or an idea, or a story, or a die-cast baseball trophy for Little League. We are told stories now through web journals, Facebook, movies, video games, advertisements, you name it. It's inescapably woven into our social DNA at this point, and we absorb it like sugar into water. As such, these memories will shine into the backs of our time-addled brains and continue to provide beacons of joy, touching our core and bringing us to tears at times. So, the haunting feelings and nostalgia? It's a wonderful medicine and a painful reminder. But why does it happen? More importantly, why does this happen with our favorite video games? Why do we constantly seek this aging connection? It raises some wild notions about the mind itself, its ability to mesh life experiences together, while also dropping lifelines to threads of remembrance left to the dust. The brain is a strange organ in this respect, difficult to duplicate, and a biological model that even AI, I presume, will take multitudes of decades to try and match in facsimile. Not that we'd even want AI to do such a thing.
Raiden, are you having fun playing with the new AI toys?
Well, yeah, I am. You can make pictures of cute anime girls and...
Enjoy it while it lasts, Raiden.
What do you mean?
Did you really think that civilians would be granted unrestricted access to such powerful military weapons forever?
Military weapons? Are you implying that this technology was created by the government?
Of course it was. This AI technology has been used by the intelligence agencies to warp the public's perception of reality for years. All in the name of national security, of course.
But why would they suddenly make the tech public and let everyone start using it?
Why would we indeed, Raiden?
Despite the relevant fear we feel at this Metal Gear clip, it helps illustrate the connective tissue of nostalgia, while also injecting that fear of loss of control. It's an exemplary manifesto of the will to power as a need, rather than a means to an end, and continues to serve as a solemn reminder of where AI can go in our society, if left unchecked. Many of you watching felt an immediate pang of longing for the story of Metal Gear. This is where nostalgia becomes something else, something spectral. The feeling doesn't just live in our memories anymore, it starts to haunt us. We keep returning to these digital worlds not simply because they were fun, but because they remind us of who we were when we first played them. This haunting, this being stuck in the glow of what once was, is what I've come to think of as retrospectral. It's not a real word, but one, rather, that came from the void, made up completely. It's nostalgia's ghost, a reflection that stares back through the static, whispering that if we could just go back just once more, maybe we could feel that whole experience again. And just in case you didn't feel the pang of nostalgia, or haven't played Metal Gear, then this should get you into the right mindset. I should probably apologize for that, but I won't. It's been 30 years after all. Let's be honest, Square Enix remade that moment twice because they knew exactly what they were doing. That's not manipulation of our emotions. That's emotional tax evasion. Now that I have your understanding, we can begin to peel back these layers and search our way through the jungle of our minds in an attempt to elucidate the origins of these connections. It's that once-in-a-lifetime chance to create a core memory. A net cast into dark waters at night in hopes of catching something rare. It's joining friends for an evening of fort building in the woods before the loggers roll in. It's a shared moment in time and space, condensed into a capsule you'll reopen months, years, even decades later. And when it hits you, nostalgia wraps its fingers around your heart. This was one of mine, playing Final Fantasy VII in my childhood home, staying up way too late on a school night, burning this game into my 17-year-old brain. I still don't know what I'd give to create those core memories again, to feel the weight of those first thoughts and feelings from my 99+ hour playthrough. And that's the crux of this video. What ghosts are we really chasing? We all cry when a character dies, or when a story hits the perfect emotional fracture. Not all of us, but most of us, I would say, have an emotional response. Whether it's Aerith getting skewered, Arthur Morgan collapsing into the dirt when the sun is setting behind him, these memories carve themselves into us. They stay etched in our minds. But here's the thing, whatever we discuss today, I urge you, don't forget the memories. They shaped you. They helped form your dopamine pathways inside of your brain. They can lift you up in ways you'd never expect, even on your darkest of days. I often find myself watching first-time playthroughs of Final Fantasy VII, which is funny because 6 is actually my favorite. But whether it's the music or the remake hype, seeing others discover the game lets me tap into that bottled nostalgia from when I was 17. I get to release it again through their laughter, their surprise, and their inevitable heartbreak. It almost feels embarrassing sometimes, but the connection is real. Every time Aerith dies, it's like a small part of me dies with her, shared through the experiences of others and that strange, sacred, collective memory. Of course, everyone's core nostalgic moments are different, haunting in their own ways. The Venn diagram overlaps, but never perfectly. Yet we all remember the living room carpet, the taste of goldfish crackers, the sound of Link's sword cutting through an Octorok. Some of us were even lucky enough to share these memories in real time. The Blockbuster Championship Tournament, for example, where I watched my awkward little brother obliterate everyone's Donkey Kong score. And he did it for the whole western part of the state. I think he placed 3rd overall in the state in the finals. Impressive. Or just ripping open Magic the Gathering packs, watching your buddy pull the new hotness and, without thinking, offering up your revised edition Shivan Dragon for a Mirage Sandbar Crocodile. Yeah, I did that. These are mine, but when I tell them, maybe you begin to overlap with me. Maybe you relate. That's the power of shared nostalgia, a whole topic on its own, but one worth mentioning as I drift back to those early days of the arcade cabinets and the growing home console market, a time that would eventually birth a game so infamously bad it helped trigger gaming's first market crash, yet somehow also earned a place in the annals of gaming history as the original GOAT. Atari didn't just make gems, they created the emotional blueprint. Even if you never touched an Atari 2600, even if you weren't alive when cabinets were humming in dark arcades, you know what Atari looks like. Its chunky pixels, its warbly tones, its bold, simple gameplay. Collectively, it formed a shared cultural memory every gamer inherits by default. Atari is gaming nostalgia's North Star, the place the medium came from, and the place we instinctively look when we talk about the good old days of the beginning. Atari single-handedly created and destroyed the gaming scene in under a decade. They left an entire landfill of Friendly Alien licensed games in their wake, based on the Friendly Alien licensed movie, of course, yet somehow survived long enough for their mark to become permanent. Even as Nintendo arrived like a titan with a plumber in tow, resurrecting a culture on life support, Atari's fingerprints were still on everything. The ghosts of gaming's nostalgia wouldn't be the same without Miyamoto's hand pressed firmly into that revival, raising skeletal remains and fleshing them back out in red overalls and green tunics the world over. But I don't want to jump too far into the NES, the 7800, early PC, Amiga, Commodore 64, or the Sega machines either. That's a topic for another day, one told a million times already. I want instead to take a quick detour back into the world of nostalgia itself, its bones, its origins, and why it still grips us by the throat when we look at the games of our youth. In 1688, a medical student named Johannes Hofer felt the inclination to describe the longing feeling that soldiers were dealing with abroad, a combination of the Greek word nostos, homecoming, and algos, pain. He rightly assumed that this pathos of the mind in soldiers that were dispatched to war was a pathological longing to return home, causing depression and malaise. Incorrectly, however, Hofer further estimated that nostalgia was a disease of the mind that could lead to all manners of complications, up to and including death, but mostly just dysentery. Oh, the 17th century, when homesickness could kill you. But dysentery was the real endgame. Simpler times, fewer microtransactions. Pleasantries aside, though, what we now feel in our minds and goosebumps when observing the games of our bygone youth is nostalgia aligned with the rawest of human feelings, a panged longing. Only we tend to feel this nostalgia with a smile on our faces, and a ray of sunshine in our hearts. These games can mean more to us than some of our own cornerstone memories at times. At least for me, they certainly can. It's weird, right? We'll forget birthdays, anniversaries, our tax filing dates, but that sound of the PlayStation logo booting up in '96, that was eternal. Human memory is truly a marvel of misplaced priorities. But here's where retrospectral creeps in for us. Unlike nostalgia, which is sweet and fleeting, this retrospectral, as I'm calling it, is sticky. It's the feeling of replaying the same level, watching the same intro, sitting in front of the same flickering screen, hoping to summon a moment that of course no longer exists, aside from in our minds. It's that quiet ache you feel when you realize the world inside the game hasn't changed, but you have. The cruel irony of nostalgia is that it promises a return, but only delivers a simulation. The pixels haven't aged. The player has. What we're really chasing isn't the game itself, but the state of mind we once held while playing it. No matter how faithful the remaster, or how vivid the emulation, the soul of the moment remains out of reach. Retrospectral, then, is the ghost of that unreachable state, replaying endlessly behind the eyes. So again I ask, why does this happen? That is the true question, isn't it? Once we place the Super Nintendo controller in our aged and calloused hands and sink our focus into the undead CRT television that we kept in storage for 20 years, the dancing lights and chiptunes can, and will, transport us to another time in our lives. Any physiologist would tell you the eyes and ears are just processing light and sound waves into recognizable patterns interpreted by our occipital and temporal lobes respectively, before being sent to the frontal lobe for dissection. Once understanding is reached, the brain triggers an endorphin response to the stimulus that matches a core memory attached to deep-seated emotional states. Large portions of the brain are flooded with activation and blood flow, causing that blissful feeling of belonging and comfort, which is way different from the original conception of nostalgia in 17th century France. I mean, they were literally defining PTSD-associated homesickness and just making up the word nostalgia to label it, much as I am here with retrospectral, to be fair. Me personally, I spend a shameful amount of my daydreams projecting the pixels of bygone eras onto the mental screen behind my eyes. I still remember skipping 3 straight days of school when Final Fantasy VII came out. Clocking nearly 100 hours that first week, I spent so much time glued to the Zenith floor television, watching Tifa pick Cloud instead of me, that it became a domestic war with my family. My solution? I dragged a 17-inch Trinitron into my room, locked the door, and called it problem solved. It had been the same before that with Final Fantasy VI, Super Metroid, Pokemon Blue, Fax Xanadu, Simon's Quest, King's Quest V, and then, worst of all, Telnet Muds. Those were a special kind of time sink, a text-based Dungeons & Dragons with friends, siphoned through a telephone line that screamed every time it connected. My dad wasn't as enthusiastic about tying up the house line as I was about slaying Aussie dragons. It was at once 50% problematic to be so addicted to the games, and 50% pure blissful independence from the perpetual loop of suffering that was high school, especially for an introvert with ADD, like myself. Masking through the days took its toll, giving little reproach from the stress that it was only natural I gravitated to gaming and reading. After all, SSRIs weren't really an option at that point, because I hadn't gone to the doctor to talk about this. We just didn't do it in the 90s. So that's all just great then. Isn't that wonderful? Yeah, sure it is. But remember, even memories can cast shadows. And for every moment of comfort, there's that faint whisper in the back of your mind that maybe, just maybe, you're not reminiscing anymore. You're dwelling. That's retrospectral as well. The bathing of one's mind in the uncanny aspects of our experiences. The haunting beauty of living with one foot in the past and one hand still gripping the controller. And so we find ourselves here, back where we started. A bunch of warm pixels. A faint glow in a quiet room, replaced by LED screens that are haunted by their own burnt-in ghosts. The story continues, even if the storytellers have changed. The cathode hum has become a digital buzz. The living room floor model CRTV replaced by LED screens that are haunted by their own burnt-in ghosts. The retrospectral hum, it lingers. Absorbed into the wood panel walls. It's the echo of every late night session, every startup screen, every memory we thought we left behind, but somehow carried forward anyway. It's you and your 4 friends playing Nintendo 64 at 2 o'clock in the morning. We built these digital campfires, we sit around them, and we share the same flickering warmth as those early hominids once did. The only difference is that our stories are rendered in polygons and save files instead of smoke and shadow. Maybe that's why nostalgia feels so haunting, because it is undead in a way. It's the soul of every version of ourselves we've ever been, flickering against the back of our minds, zombified remains given emotional baggage to carry, forgotten and left to the dark. Retrospectral is what happens when those remains become familiarized, even if just momentarily, when we stop running from it and start listening to what it has to say. Because buried inside that ache for the past isn't just loss, it's gratitude. It's proof that something once mattered enough to leave an imprint deep enough to return to. A cut into the record that plays wistfully on our speakers. So if you ever find yourself there, sitting in front of an old screen, the faint hiss of static whispering in the speakers, your hands resting on a controller that's seen better days, try to let the feeling wash over you. Let the pixels burn their stories into your retina one more time, because maybe nostalgia was never a sickness at all, as the late Dr. Hofer would have us believe. Maybe it was our way of remembering who we were before the noise, before the constant updates, before the data, before the discontent. Maybe it was never about going back. Maybe it was about realizing we never truly left. So next time you're chasing the nostalgic high, just remember, you're essentially tricking your brain into emotional time travel using a 480 progressive scan image from your childhood. And honestly, worth it.